لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. I pray that you are well, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. Welcome to our level 3 Shafi'i Usul course on understanding Shafi'i Usul, Imam al-Saqqaf's Mukhtasar Fawa Al-Makkiyya, for essential principles for Shafi'i students bi'idhnillah. So we are currently at a crossroads in this book because we are going over one important section and then starting a new section. So we completed one section and now we begin with another section that contains certain important, call them studies, right? So we deal firstly with the ranks of scholarship, covering the degrees of scholarship in sacred law and exiting areas of dispute, which is khuruj min al-khilaf. So those are the subtopics that we deal with in this lesson. Our course outcomes remain consistent throughout, and this lesson focuses on the pages 53 to 58 in our text, defining scholarly ranks in Sharia, guidance in matters of ikhtilaf, and navigating personal practice. These are some of the lesson outcomes for this dars, insha'Allah. Some key concepts for this dars: ijtihad, khuruj min al-khilaf, ikhtilaf, mujtahid. From the top. So ijtihad is independent reasoning in Islamic law. Khuruj min al-khilaf is a reference to avoiding disputed matters by staying on the safe side. And ikhtilaf in general refers to scholarly differences. And a mujtahid is a qualified scholar capable of ijtihad, which is again independent reasoning in Islamic law. To kick us off with the question, inshallah ta'ala, we ask, what should one do when the mujtahidun, independent jurists, differ? What should one do when they differ? So we know we follow the mujtahidun, but if the mujtahidun differ, then what would the muqallidun, the followers, then have to do? So we commence with the text of the author, insha'Allah ta'ala. قال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى ونفعنا الله بعلومه وعلومكم آمين. al-Ula. So this is the first of 3 or 4, call them sub-studies, like little articles that he presents after the important first section of the book. So the first segment speaks about maratibul ulama, or the ranks of the scholars. So he says, قال في مطلب الإنقاذ, in مطلب الإيقاظ, or إيقاظ rather, by Muhammad ibn Sulaiman al-Kurdi, he says, maratibul ulama is sittun. The ranks of the scholars are 6. There are 6 levels of ijtihad or scholarship. Al-Ula, the first rank is mujtahidun mustaqillun. The first one is a mujtahid. So we said that's independent reasoner. Mustaqillun, and then again the word mustaqil means independent. Kal-arba'ati wa adrabihim, like the 4 and the likes of them. So who are the 4? They would be Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. What makes them mujtahidun mustaqillun? What makes them what we refer to as mujtahid mutlaq? In essence, what it comes down to is that the eponyms of the 4 madhahib, as well as the founders of the other madhahib that did not survive, they were independent to the degree that they could refer to the Quran and Sunnah independently from the Arabic, with their own legal framework, or usul al-fiqh, with their own reliance on jarh and ta'adil from their own corpus of information of ahadith and narrator criticism. So it's real independence. They're not referring to the kitab of any other scholar. They are applying the tools and the knowledge that they have acquired through the qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they apply that directly to the sources of the law, and they then arrive at at their views. So that's the first category. They are completely independent. They rely on nobody else, not for their furu' nor for their usul. Now we move on to the second category. This one is mutlaqun muntasibun. It is a mujtahid that is still somewhat independent. So he's capable of ijtihad independently. However, he is muntasibun. He ascribes or he subscribes to a particular school of thought. So he says kal Muzani, like Imam al-Muzani. Who is Imam al-Muzani, right? This is very important. Imam al-Muzani, he was Abu Ibrahim, and this of course comes from the footnotes of your text, so you can actually follow along in the footnotes. He was Abu Ibrahim Ismail ibn Yahya ibn Ismail al-Muzani. That was his name. Nisbah ila Muzaynah min Mudar. So he was from this place called Muzaynah of Mudar, and he was al-Masri. He was from Egypt, so this was a place located in Masr. Sahibul Imam Shafi'i, he was the Sahib of Imam Shafi'i. Now you may think that this is stating that he was a friend of Imam Shafi'i. Actually, it does not mean that. In the context of Islamic scholarship, when we speak about somebody is the Sahib of another, then it actually means he was the student of that person. So the Ashab of Shafi'i, the Ashab of Imam Shafi'i are technically the students of Imam Shafi'i. So yes, Imam al-Muzani was in fact one of the senior students of Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah ta'ala. So he's a key figure in the madhab. How key? He was born in the year 175 Hijri, which means that in the year 200, when Imam Shafi'i moved to Egypt and started to teach what we refer to today as the Shafi'i madhab, right? Or in the context of Shafi'i terminology, his qawl jadid, right? His revised views. Imam al-Muzani became Imam Shafi'i's student at that point. So he was 25 years of age approximately at that time. Already, and after that as well, he earned the description of being a zahid, an ascetic, someone who doesn't have much inclination to the dunya and its glitz and glamour. He was alim, he was a scholar of note, mujtahid, he was an independent reasoner, qawiyul hujjah, and he was very adept at legal arguments, right? And his ability with legal debate was quite profound. Min kutubihi, from among his works, we find Mukhtasar al-Umm. Now, the Mukhtasar al-Umm is technically a mukhtasar of the fiqh of Imam Shafi'i. Imam Shafi'i wrote an encyclopedia in the form of Kitab al-Umm. And this encyclopedic work was not written as a book that should be studied like a textbook is studied. A textbook tends to be a shorter text that a teacher can work through from cover to cover with explanatory notes compiled by the larger texts. So what was required in order for the Shafi'i madhab to proliferate after Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, other than the amazing students that he left behind, was that his work be summarized in the form of a textbook that can then be taught and spread throughout the ummah. So Imam al-Muzani took up that challenge and he wrote what was then called the Mukhtasar of but it is now known as Mukhtasar al-Muzani. And it is the Mukhtasar of Imam al-Muzani that people studied after Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala passed away. Remember, to acquire a copy of the is going to be a rare opportunity because you need to gain access to the original copy. You also need to pay someone or put in the labor of copying the entire book, then reading it to the teacher, and so on and so forth. So that is a senior scholar's type of endeavor. But any type of entry-level study into the Shafi'i school required a more accessible text. So along came Imam al-Muzani and he wrote this type of text that essentially became the book to study in the Shafi'i school for many, many years. Until eventually other books were written, but they relied on Imam al-Muzani's book and his notes for their work thereafter. Imam al-Muzani was one of the four major students of Imam Shafi'i's Qawl Jadid. The others, Harmala, Buwaiti, and Rabi'. Rabi' and Imam al-Muzani, Rabi' ibn Sulaiman al-Muradi, if I remember correctly, who is the one who transmits the Risala, and then Imam al-Muzani, these were the most prolific contributors to the madhab of Imam Shafi'i after Imam Shafi'i passed away, rahimahullahu ta'ala. So that's some background about Imam al-Muzani. So he is actually in the second category of ijtihad, which is he has the ability to make his own ijtihad, but he attributes himself to another madhab. So he is confined, metaphorically speaking, he's confined by the framework, the legal framework set out by Imam Shafi'i. Imam Shafi'i wrote his own legal framework, and that's what we find in the Risala, and then he's got his own application of that framework in what we call his Kitab al-Umm. So he's got the usul, he's got the furu'. Imam al-Muzani applies the same usul, applies the same furu', and using the framework of the madhab, applies his own ijtihad and arrives at points that are more developed than Imam Shafi'i. He expands on it, perhaps differs with Imam Shafi'i at occasions as well because of finding evidence. And often Imam Shafi'i would actually leave the doorway open for his students to find other evidence. He would say things like, إِذَا صَحَّ الْحَدِيث فَهُوَ مَذْهَبِي. If the hadith is found to be authenticated, then that is my opinion. This type of statement is not for the broader masses of Muslims. This is for his qualified students who actually have that type of rank. So that was the second category. Then we move on to the third category of ijtihad, which is ashabul wujuh. In the Shafi'i school, this is referred to as the ashab, the companions of al-wujuh, the opinions. This is actually a technical term, right? It's part of the Shafi'i nomenclature, and it means all of the scholars who are part of the Shafi'i madhab, from Imam Shafi'i students all the way down. They are all the ashabul wujuh until eventually the madhab reaches a point where tarjih is made, and then you have the hawashi, and then of course you have scholars, but they are no longer necessarily considered as mujtahidun who you should follow. So the ashabul wujuh are still the scholars within the madhab as the madhab is developing before it reaches its point of fruition as we know it today. Who are some examples of the ashabul wujuh? They are Kaffal al-Marwazi and Abi Hamid. That's Abu Hamid al-Isfarayini. So who are these individuals? Kaffal, he was the great Shafi'i faqih Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Ismail al-Qaffal al-Shashi al-Kabir. He was born in the year 291, and he was a student. He heard hadith from Ibn Khuzaymah, the author of the Sahih. Imam al-Shirazi, he says about Imam Qaffal al-Marwazi, he says, كان إماما, he was a great scholar, وله مصنفات كثيرة, he had many books that he authored, ليس لأحد مثلها, no one had authored works the like of it. وهو أول من صنف الجدل الحسن, is the first who wrote excellent arguments من الفقهاء, among the scholars of fiqh. وله كتاب في أصول الفقه, and he has a book in أصول الفقه, legal theory. وله شرح الرسالة, he's got a sharh, an exegesis of Imam Shafi'i's Risala. وعنه, and from him, انتشر المذهب الشافعي فيما وراء النهر. From him, in other words, from Imam Qaffal al-Marwazi, the madhab of Imam Shafi'i spread in ma wara an-nahar, and he passed away in the year 365 after the Hijrah. And then as for Abu Hamid, he was the Mufti of Basra again a significant contributor to the Shafi'i school, and he was the Shaykh of the Shafi'is in Basra. His name was Ahmad ibn Bishr ibn Amir al-Marwazi. He was the Sahib, the author of At-Tasanif, many works. تفقه بأبي إسحاق المروزي. He studied fiqh under the great scholar Abu Ishaq al-Marwazi, also of the Ashab al-Wujuh. وألف شرحا, and he wrote a sharh, he wrote a important exegetical work, لمختصر المزني, of the Mukhtasar of Imam al-Muzani that we spoke about before. وعنه أخذ فقهاء البصرة, and it was from him that the scholars of Basra took the madhab of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala. توفي سنة 362 rahimahullah. Now we move on to the next category. So those were the Ashabul Wujuh. The next category here is Mujtahidul Fatwa. Mujtahidul Fatwa. In this category, you find scholars who are now capable of looking back retrospectively on the madhab, seeing all of the opinions, and then deciding between those opinions which opinion is going to represent the actual madhab. And these scholars are the likes of Imam Al-Rafi'i and Imam Al-Nawawi rahimahumullah ta'ala. So Imam Al-Rafi'i is obviously an extremely significant figure in the Shafi'i school, along with Imam Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala. They kind of fit into the same rank. He is one of the great Shafi'i fuqaha, munaqqih al-madhab. He refined the school. وَمُحَرِّرِ مَسَائِلِهِ وَفُرُوعِهِ. He refined and sifted through, right, all of the details of the madhab. He was Al-Imam Abu al-Qasim. He was known as Abu al-Qasim Abdul Karim ibn Muhammad ibn Abdul Karim al-Qazwini. Al-Qazwini is a nisbah to a town near the Caspian Sea, Qazwin, Caspian. وهو منسوب إلى رافع ibn Khadij al-Sahabi. He is attributed, Imam al-Rafi'i, that ya nisbiyya there, is an attribution that goes back to the Sahabi, Rafi' ibn Khadij. And he was born in the town of Qazwin in the year 557 Hijri. وَكَانَ لَهُ فِيهَا مَجْلِسٌ لِلتَّفْسِيرِ وَالْحَدِيثِ. He used to have a majlis of tafsir, Quranic exegesis, and hadith, the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's got some important works in the madhab, such as Fathul Aziz fi Sharh al-Wajiz, which is a commentary of Imam al-Ghazali's work Al-Wajiz. And he wrote other works as well, contributing significantly to the madhab. He also wrote his book Al-Muharrar, from which Imam Nawawi wrote his book Minhaj al-Talibin. He passed away in Qazwin in the year 623 rahimahullahu ta'ala. The next figure that we mentioned there was Imam Al-Nawawi, right? Imam Al-Nawawi rahimahullah was also, if not we can call him the chairman of the Shafi'i madhab for all intents and purposes, because it is his work upon which the fatwa of the madhab is given, right? The official mu'tamad book in the madhab is Minhaj al-Talibin. So Imam al-Nawawi was the great Shafi'i faqih. He was a mujtahid in his own right. His name was Muhyiddin Abu Zakaria Yahya ibn Sharaf al-Hurani, wa huwa mansubun ila Nawa. His attribution is to a place called Nawa of the village of Huran in Syria, in Damascus. Wulida biha, he was born there in the year 631. وتعلم بدمشق, he learned and studied in Damascus. وأقام biha, he resided there. He wrote amazing works such as Al-Majmu' Sharh al-Muhadhab, Rawdat al-Talibin, and other works like the Sharh of Sahih Muslim, Riyad al-Salihin, and many other works, subhanallah. And he passed away in the year 676. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon him. So we move on to the next category. Why am I spending so much time on the biographies of these scholars? Because now we're starting to look at the development and the contributors and the levels of the Shafi'i school. And inshallah, we will include in our dars a diagram so you can see where everyone fits in bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. We've covered that already in some of our other courses as well. So that was the first four categories. Notice you go from Imam Shafi'i all the way down to Imam Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala. There is where the fatwa of the madhab is basically going to be formulated. And then from there you have the fifth rank, which is Nadharun fi tarjihi ma ikhtalafa fihi shaykhan. Those who are now going to make tarjih, or they're going to give preference and decide on matters in which Ash-Shaykhan, Imam al-Nawawi and Imam Rafi'i, where they couldn't decide on the matter. So these are the muhakkikun of the madhab. They come after Imam Rafi'i and Imam Nawawi, and they look at matters where they didn't resolve something, and they then apply themselves. Here you also have the likes of Ibn Hajar al-Haytami rahimahullah ta'ala, Imam al-Ramli, and others. Imam Khatib Shirbini, and all of those commenters of the Minhaj and the Hawashi and so forth. So Imam Al-Isnawi and the likes of him, that's category number 5. Category number 6 is Hamalatu Fiqhin, those who study fiqh, and of course maratibuhu mukhtalifa, their ranks are quite a lot. And then فَالْأَعْلَوْنَ يَلْتَحِكُونَ بِأَهْلِ الْمَرْتَبَةِ الْخَامِسَةِ, the highest among them would be a part of the 5th rank technically, because of course people, you have various degrees of ability in fiqh. So let's look at this table over here. It's the same information. We have maratibul ulama. You have this classification that separates between those whom we may follow or make taqleed of and those whom we may not. So may yajuzu taqleeduhum, those who you may follow, are the first four categories. You have the independent mujtahid, mujtahidun mustaqil, like the 4 founders of the 4 schools of Sunni Islam. Then you have mutlaqun muntasib. You have an independent mujtahid, but he attributes himself to a particular legal framework, like the students of Imam Shafi'i or the students of Imam Abu Hanifa, etc. Then you have the scholars of the madhab who contributed to the expansion and the growth and the development of the madhab. They are the Ashabul Wujuh. The examples given were Qaffal al-Marwazi and Abu Hamid al-Isfarayini. Then we looked at the Mujtahidul Fatwa, where this ijtihad leads this mujtahid to a special rank, and they provide you with the tarjih of the madhab. They provide you with the actual view of what the madhab now states, and they make a refinement and development of the madhab to give it its not final state, but its reformed state as we have it now. And then finally, you have the last group, which we will see in a moment. Technically, we don't say that it's yajuzu taqleeduhum, right? There's no official statement to say that it's permissible to make taqleed of them, but we'll get to what the ruling is there. Who are they? They are those who can decide and investigate matters that Imam Nawawi and Imam Rafi'i differed about, like Imam Al-Isnawi and others, and then those who study fiqh who are of various ranks. وقد نصوا على أن المراتب الأربع الأول, there are many scholarly discourses stating that one may follow the first 4 categories. يجوز تقليدهم, it's permissible to follow them. وأما الأخيرتان, as for the final 2 categories over here, فالإجماع الفعلي, so the practical consensus من زمنهم, from their time إلى الآن, till our time, الأخذ بقولهم is to accept their views. What does this mean? Practical consensus. Remember, consensus or ijma' in the strict usuli sense, in the sense of Islamic legal theory, is a very difficult concept to realize in real time, in real life. Some scholars even argued that it's only theoretical and it doesn't actually exist in terms of proof. I'm not saying that that is the view that we go with. We do believe that it absolutely exists, but in a way that is not perhaps as mechanical as is sometimes described. What's being mentioned here is not that type of ijma'. What's being mentioned here is the practice of the larger portion of the Muslim Ummah. So who is the Muslim Ummah in terms of scholarly opinion, right? The Muslim Ummah for Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah consists of the 4 madhahib, consists of the Asha'ira, the Maturidiyya and the Hanabila in terms of theology. That would be the overwhelming majority of Muslims represented there in Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So as for practice within this corpus, generally the practice has always been to accept the opinions of the likes of Imam Al-Isnawi and Ibn Hajar and all of those other scholars in between who also have ability of ijtihad. Can you make taqleed of them? Yes, you may make taqleed of them, and in practice we do that as well. Tamam. So we proceed inshaAllah ta'ala. It continues, وَفِي الْحَوَاشِ الْكُلْيُوبِ إن قدر المجتهد على الترجيح دون الاستنباط فهو مجتهد الفتوى. If the the mujtahid is able to give preponderance, right? Decide between differing matters. Dun al-istinbat, but he's not able to extrapolate for himself. So you can present him with two issues and he'll be able to take the one issue and look at the other issue and try to decide between the two. But if you give him no issues and you tell him, produce an answer, he's not capable of doing that. فَهُوَ مُجْتَهِدُ الْفَتْوَى. This is referred to as the mujtahid al-fatwa according to the Hawashi there. وَإِنْ قَدَرَ عَلَى الْإِسْتِنْبَاطِ. If he is able to extrapolate law مِنْ قَوَاعِدِ إِمَامِهِ, from the legal framework of his imam, then he is considered فَهُوَ مُجْتَهِدُ الْمَذْهَبِ. He's a mujtahid of the madhab or in the madhab. أو على الاستنباط من الكتاب والسنة. Or if the mujtahid is capable of extrapolating law directly from the Quran and Sunnah, فهو المطلق. That would be the ability of the mujtahid mutlaq, the unrestricted, completely independent mujtahid. So in terms of the ranks given by the Hawashi, we see that there are three. The first one is capability of giving tarjih, not istinbat. That's mujtahidul fatwa. Number two, the one who is capable of making istinbat or extrapolating from the or within the legal framework of his imam, then that is the mujtahid. These words here at the bottom should have been changed. Not fal fi'lu afdal. That's from a different slide. It should be mujtahidul madhab and then the last one mutlaq. Mujtahidul madhab over here and mutlaq over there. Now we move on to the next issue. We said that there are three. That was the first one, the ranks of the scholars. The second one is al-khuruju min al-khilaf. You may or may not have heard of this concept before. It means that when scholars differ, what's recommended to do is step outside of the paradigm of difference by erring on the side of caution or doing the more cautious thing. That's the essence of khuruj min al-khilaf. So let's look at what the scholars say about this concept and its application, inshaAllah. اعلم أن الخروج من الخلاف. Know that to escape a paradigm of differing opinions, mustahabbun, that's recommended. ولذلك, and for that reason, shurutun, there are conditions. ذكرها, this was mentioned, علامة al-Kurdi, by Imam al-Kurdi rahimahullah ta'ala, عن السيوطي, which he transmits from Imam al-Suyuti. What does he say? He says that there are a number of principles that we need to stick to when we think about khuruj min al-khilaf. The first one. I think there might have been a mix-up of the slides here. Okay, no problem. I'm going to read the first one from the kitab. The first one is actually أَلَّا يُوقِعَ فِي خِلَافٍ آخَرٍ. That if there are two or more mujtahidun, mujtahid A says you need to rinse your mouth and your nose in order for your ghusl to be valid. Mujtahid B says you don't need to rinse your mouth and your nose for your ghusl to be valid. It is simply recommended. Tamam? Now, the general recommendation is escape this framework of difference, right? Rinse your mouth and your nose because then you're safe according to both. Okay, but that's an easy example. Now you understand what khuruj min al-khilaf is. But now there's certain conditions, because in an easy example like that, you'll know what to do. But what about when it's not so simple? So the first rule is أَلَّا يُوقِعَ فِي خِلَافٍ آخَرٍ. The one escape mustn't lead you into another problem elsewhere. وَمِن ثَمَّ, he says, as such, كَانَ فَصْلُ الْوِتْرِ أَفْضَلْ مِنْ وَصْلِهِ. As such, it is better to separate witr. So let's say you're going with the 3 rak'at of witr, then to pray 2 rak'at and then break the salah or end the salah and then an additional 1 unit of prayer. That is considered better. In the Shafi'i school, the relied upon view is that to connect the 2 and the third one, right, the first 2 and the last one, the way you would pray Maghrib prayer, the way the Hanafis pray witr, in the Shafi'i school that is considered makruh. So to separate it is better than to join it. Okay. وَلَمْ يُرَاعِ خِلَافَ أَبِي حَنِيفَةَ. So you don't say, well, okay, to separate it by the Shafi'is is better, but according to the Hanafis, you can't pray separated, you must pray together. So I'm going to consider the difference of the Hanafis and I'm going to pray together. He says, no, you can't consider that difference because لأن من العلماء من لا يجيز الوصل. There are some scholars who don't permit you to join it again. So now you're going to end up avoiding the difference with the Hanafis, but then you're going to end up falling into a difference with some other scholars. So now, instead of doing that, you just stick to your own madhab in that case. Tamam? Then we move on to the second point that he mentions here. Bismillah. He says, the second point is, أَلَّا يُخَالِفَ سُنَّةً ثَابِتَةً. The opinion that you want to consider mustn't go against an established sunnah. وَمِن ثَمَّ, and as such, sunnah رَفْعُ الْيَدَيْنِ. It is sunnah to raise the hands in the salah, other than at the takbiratul ihram when you move from one position to the other. وَلَمْ يُبَالِ بِرَأْيِ مَنْ قَالَ بِإِبْطَالِ الصَّلَاةِ مِنَ الْحَنَفِيَّةِ. And you do not give consideration to the opinion that states that your salah will be nullified according to some Hanafis. He says, لِأَنَّهُ ثَابِتٌ عَنِ النَّبِيِّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. Because according to us, this is an established sunnah from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, min riwayati 50 sahabiyan, and it is reported by about 50 of the companions. Now, this should not be understood as ammunition to blame the Hanafis or consider the opinion weak or anything of the sort. This is demonstrating how tolerance is practiced. We practice tolerance, but practicing tolerance must not make one compromise one's own practice and beliefs. And that's essentially the limitations that we are establishing here. When do you consider the view of the other, and when are you not able to consider the view of the other, and you practice as per normal? Do you consider their practice as invalid, as incorrect, as wrong? It's like everything else in madhahib. I believe my way, my school is the correct one. But there's a possibility that we made a mistake or that we're wrong. And I believe that their opinion or the other opinions is the incorrect opinions. Otherwise, I'd be following that. But there's a possibility that they are correct because this is based on ijtihad. So that's the approach we should generally have when considering these matters, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So it mustn't contradict the sunnah. It doesn't mean that, the Hanafi school actually goes against the sunnah. No, this is a Shafi'i principle. So we're trying to decide what the Shafi'i student should do. Tamam? We proceed to the third principle that Imam Al-Kurdi mentions from Imam As-Suyuti. He says, أن يقوي مدركه بحيث لا يعد هفوة ومن ثم كان الصوم في السفر أفضل لمن قوي عليه ولم يبالي بقول داود لا يصح. He says that the argument must be a strong one that you are considering. It mustn't be the type of opinion that is considered erroneous or mistake. So fasting in the state of traveling, or fasting while you are traveling, is better for the person who can endure it. One does not give consideration to the opinion of Imam Dawood al-Zahiri, who says that it's not valid to do so. Because Imam al-Haramain, our great Shafi'i scholar, part of the Ashab al-Wujud, the teacher of Imam al-Ghazali, he wrote regarding the Ahl al-Zahir, he says, في هذه المسألة أن المحققين لا يقيمون لخلاف أهل الظاهر وزنا. The scholars of our law, they don't consider the Zahiri views when making the fiqh, when deciding on what to do in fiqh, because they don't consider the methodology of Ahlul Zahir as a valid methodology within Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. It's technically outside of the framework of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and Allah knows best. He says, وذكر في الإقت أن صاحب المهمات نبه على اعتبار أمر آخر. Now, this act, I initially thought it was Aqtul Jid fi Ijtihadi wa Taqleed by Shah Waliullah Dehlawi, but it's actually a reference to Al-Aqdul Farid fi Ahkam al-Taqleed, very similar name. It's كتاب في أصول الفقه الشافعي لأبي الحسن علي بن عبد الله ibn Ahmad السمهودي, who passed away in 911, the same year as Imam Suyuti rahimahullah. حققه رمضان محمد عيد هيتمي كرسالة ماجستير في كلية الشريعة. So it's an interesting work you can refer to here. بجامعة الأزهر في مصر عام 1401. تمام. So in this note here, he says وهو أن يكون مأخذ الخلاف قويا. The point of what you are taking from the differing opinions, the point of khilaf, the point of difference must be strong, right? It can't be a weak difference. So we consider every difference even if it's based on nothing. No, it must be based on a strong point. فإن ضعف, if it's weak, لم يستحب الخروج منه, then it's not recommended to escape that frame of difference. قاله ابن عبد السلام, Imam Ibn Abd al-Salam, he mentioned this. والنووي في مجموعه, and Imam Alawiy in the Sharh al-Muhadhab, when he said لا حرمة لخلاف يخالف ما ثبت في السنة. We don't consider or give any sort of we don't sort of respect or consider, right, the differences of that which differs with the established sunnah. In other words, authentic hadith, right? But again, scholars could potentially differ about the authenticity of a hadith. Some might believe it to be authentic while others believe it to be inauthentic. It's rare. It's usually whether it's Hasan or not Hasan, or whether it is da'if or very da'if, or whether it reaches the point of Hasan or not. It's very rare that you find a difference of the hadith being either authentic or very weak, right? And Allah knows best. وقال القاضي حسين إنما يصار إلى الاحتياط عند الشافعي. We only resort to precaution by the Shafi'i framework, يعني في الخروج من الخلاف, when we want to consider when we must escape the ambit of difference. إذا لم يكن فيه ارتكاب محظور, when there is no committing of something haram أو مكروه or disliked, أو مذهبي or مذهب specific. قال الشيخ علي بن عبد الرحيم با كثير ما نصه. قال ابن عبد السلام في قواعده الكبرى أطلق الأصحاب أن الخروج من الخلاف حيث وقع أفضل من التورط فيه, وليس الأمر على ما أطلقوه, it should be actually, بل الخلاف على أقسام. So we consider precaution and we exit the frame of difference, but if that's going to lead us to doing something haram or something makruh, right, or it's going to go against something in our school of thought, our madhab, now we're no longer going to consider it. Ibn Abd al-Salam mentions in his Qawaid al-Kubra that the ashab have expressed that to escape the ambit of difference when it occurs is better than to fall short therein. However, it's not always like that. It's not unrestrictedly like that. Rather, there are different types of differences. Al-khilafu ala aqsam. So what are the categories of differences? You get al-awwal, al-thani, al-ula, it should be al-ula, al-thani, al-thalith. No, al-awwal is correct. بين التحريم والجواز. So you have firstly a difference between one scholar says haram and the other one says permissible. Yeah, ihtiyat is better. It's better to take the cautious step and rather be precautious, in other words. The second category is when it's between al-ijab wal-istihbab. It's between something either being compulsory or being recommended, right? Is it compulsory or is it recommended? Is it compulsory to give fidya or is it recommended to give fidya? Is it compulsory to give fitra? Is it recommended to give fitra? مثلا. If that is the case, then بين الإجابة والاستحباب فالفعل أفضل. Again, to do the act. In other words, since it might be compulsory, then it's better to do the act. Number 3, في المشروعية فالفعل أفضل. In the cases of مشروعية, then فعل is أفضل, and we'll explain that in a moment. وفي مواضع من التحفة, in places of the تحفة المحتاج, he says حكم الحاكم يرفع الخلاف, the ruling of a judge lifts the ambit of difference في المسائل الخلافية, where you find issues in which there's differences of opinion. ويصير الأمر متفقا عليه, and then the matter becomes agreed upon. So yes, you may find theoretical differences in books, but once a hakim has placed his judgment and he says this is the opinion we're going with, that's it. Then there's no more difference of opinion. It's muttafaqun alayh. If the hakim says the moon has been sighted, it is Ramadan tomorrow, then that is the final decree, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So stepping back quickly to this note here. So when we speak about in matters fil mashru'iyyah, let's focus and try to understand what is meant here. We said the first category is between haram and permissibility, and it's better to be cautious there. The second category between compulsion and recommendation, there it's better to be cautious and do the act. In the case of fil mashru'iyyah or fil mashru'iyyah, fal fi'lu afdal, it's better to do the act in cases of كقراءة البسملة, like recitation of the basmala في الفاتحة, in سورة الفاتحة. فإنها سنة عند مالك وواجبة عند الشافعي. It is sunnah according to Imam Malik, it's wajib according to Imam Shafi'i. ورفع اليدين في التكبيرات, raising the hands in the takbirat of salah. فإن أبا حنيفة لا يراه, Imam Abu Hanifa doesn't consider it من السنن of the sunnah. وهو إحدى الروايات عند مالك, and it is a sunnah according to one of the opinions of Imam Malik. وهو عند الشافعي sunnah, but according to Imam Shafi'i it is sunnah. So there where you find differences like that, where you find differences like that, then you don't consider the difference, you rather do the practice, right? You rather do the practice. So for example, so in the case of the basmala, right? The Malik is considered it sunnah, the Shafi is considered it wajib. So the Malikis should ideally do it because it's sunnah for them. But the Malikis shouldn't leave it off considering the Hanafis, because then they're going to be differing with the Shafis again. So I hope that kind of gives us the understanding when it contradicts your own practice or it creates a problem for you, then you don't need to consider the difference. Okay. So to summarize the lesson, we learned that it is best to stay away from from doubtful matters. When there's doubtful matters and you're unclear, the best approach is to stay out of that arena of differences or the arena of doubt. One should prioritize established sunnah practices, right, and not go contrary to that where you can help it. And then one should balance between precaution, obligation, and permissibility, as the breakdown had shown us. And we also saw the role of judicial rulings in resolving disputes. And we also learned the various categories of ijtihad, that it's not just one size fits all, but rather based on the skill set, the accessibility, and so on, and even the contribution to the school. And Allah knows best. That's all for this lesson. Until next time, inshallah ta'ala, jazakumullahu khairan wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad. Subhanallahi wa bihamdi. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa